Is there a
Brian,
waiting
did you
room?
and Shinichi present in green?
Um, my name is Kathy. I work as a research assistant at the collaborative, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Before we start, I'm just going to go over a few items. So first, we will have participation certificates available for this webinar. And if you would like a certificate, if you could please email to request your certificate, that'd be great. I'll put my email in the chat box in just a minute. Also, we'll be using polls throughout the presentation, just as an interactive component to hear about your experiences and get feedback from you. So I will also be sharing a link to the poll in the chat box. If you could go ahead and click that link once it's in there so you can have it up and ready when we get to that part of the presentation, that would be great. If you have any questions at any time during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature so we can make sure we get to everyone's questions and make sure they're all answered. And we are recording this webinar, so we will be sending out a recording and transcript to all the attendees afterwards. And I believe that's everything. So with that, I'll pass it off to Gretchen, Brian, and Hannah.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. My name is Brian McCormick, and I am a investigator with the Temple University Collaborative on Community Inclusion here at Temple University in Philadelphia, which is where I'm coming from. I've got the blur on because my office is a bit messy, just a lot of books and stuff. But we're happy that you joined us today on this topic on family leisure. I also want to say thanks to Hannah Wells and Kathy for their support. Hannah and Kathy have been assisting in the development of this, and this is the first in a series of webinars on using using leisure as a means for family support and development and enrichment. And so I'm going to give an opportunity now for Gretchen to go ahead and introduce herself, and then we'll get started on session outcomes and some activities.
Hello, good morning, good noon, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. Again, my name is Gretchen Sneathen. I work with the Temple University Collaborative on Community Inclusion. I am in a merged room. It is my office / fitness / playroom for my kids, and it is also quite messy. So it is, that's why you can't see everything going on behind me. And I am excited to present on this topic, and we're excited that you guys are here to join us.
Thanks, Gretchen. And yeah, just to reinforce, we really are thrilled that so many people are interested in the topic, because it's something that we certainly feel is really important. And so some of the outcomes of this session, we want to make sure that people are able to identify the value and the importance of family leisure and family functioning and development, as well as the benefits that are accrued. There are a couple of different types that a lot of people don't think about in great detail. I mean, Gretchen and I both have a background in recreation and leisure studies and understanding how recreation and leisure can be used as a developmental tool. As we work at the collaborative, we're also very interested in supporting adults with mental health conditions to be able to participate in a full range of activities in their communities. And parenting is a critically important role for everyone, including people with mental health conditions. And so we want to make sure that people can identify some of the importance and benefits particularly for parents who are dealing with mental health conditions. And then identify a few strategies for connecting with children through leisure. And as Kathy indicated, and I saw she just popped into the poll, participation certificates. For those who need a certificate of attendance, you can request that from Kathy. And I see she's already put in a link to the poll everywhere. So with that, we're going to go to our first poll. And we'd like to ask you to share a family leisure memory that comes to mind, either as a parent or when you were a child. So something that comes to mind. So click on the link in the poll in the chat. It'll take you to a website. And on that website, you can just put in a couple of words of, there we go, going camping, family memories. playing in the front yard with siblings, road trips, vacations, picnics, bike rides to the Dairy Queen. I used to do that when I was probably 10. Going to the park, trip to the zoo, swimming, going to the beach, walks after dinner, camping, riding horses, going camping. All right.
Lots of outside activities, board games too. Yay.
Yeah. Playing in the front yard with siblings, road trip. All right, so these are all great examples. I mean, I really appreciate folks taking the time to post. And yeah, as Gretchen says, a lot of these are outside things, but we do have a couple of board game sorts of things and indoor things. We'll keep those in mind as we move forward. So keeping in mind that activity, what stood out? Why was that particular experience? What was it that was memorable about it to you? Quality time spent with loved one, bonding, and yeah. My parents were having fun. Nope. Not being too serious. Relaxing, I see in the chat. Someone's added in low expectations, lots of laughing. Shared time together. It's interesting too, because one of the things that we've been interested in, and please keep adding comments, is that sometimes these experiences also provided a event, something that connected us together. In other words, if I was to say to my brother or sister, we used to go to the Delaware beaches. I grew up on the East Coast. We used to go to Delaware beaches, and we used to rake clams in the swampy part of Delaware. And there were always horseshoe crabs, and you'd always kick up a horseshoe crab and it would take off and it would bump into everybody's ankles, and everybody would be jumping around trying to escape the horseshoe crab. Not that they would hurt you, but they were just weird. But if I was to say that to my brother or sister, they would know exactly what I was talking about. And so this idea of shared time together, doing something new, you know, a lot of positive emotion sort of expressed in these about parents having fun and not being too serious. Hannah, can we scroll down a little bit to look at some of the other ones?
Someone shared in the chat directly to us that it gave them a chance to share skills with my family. So, you know, there you get to see the skills of your family members a little bit differently. And sometimes depending on the role and the activity that you're doing, sometimes the kids are the expert in the activity, which is cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that opportunity to provide opportunities for competence and for connection, relaxing, creating memories every time of our lives, low expectations and lots of laughing. So a lot of real good positive sorts of experiences. I do oftentimes do remember that sometimes there are, you know, sometimes there are less than positive outcomes. Sometimes it can be high stress when things don't go right. So it isn't necessarily that everything is always positive. And so that's something to keep in mind. But by and large, I think these are some of the memories that we think are important and connect us. And so we wanted to start with a little bit of a discussion about families in general, because this is something that we may all have one, but a lot of times we don't really think about how families work. And so if we can go to the next slide, Hannah. So one of the models of family functioning, it comes from Olson, and it's called a circumplex model, and that's not necessarily that important. But what is important is there are a couple of different things about families that we want to keep in mind when we think about how families function. The first, obviously, and this is one that most people would understand, is called family cohesion. we, in some of the comments, even in the last poll, showed that people talked about emotional bond, that family members feel connected and close to each other and have generally good relationships. And so cohesion is important. But what's interesting about the model that Olson identifies is that cohesion has extremes, and you can have a family that is completely disconnected, but you can also have a family that is completely enmeshed. Neither of those is a particularly good thing. Family adaptability is another one of the aspects of family overall functioning. And that is the ability to adjust to change. And when things unexpectedly happen, members can be flexible and work through it together. And so this idea of cohesion and adaptability are two of the big concerns that we look at when we talk about family function. And so we consider these two as main dimensions of family function, the concepts of cohesion or connection and adaptability, or the ability to deal with change. This happens through communication. And so family communication is really how people talk to each other, and having open communication means that members can talk about things that are both good things and bad things. And so this is really also one of the concerns and challenges in communication, is that oftentimes families have to be able to deal with both the good and the bad, and be able to communicate about it. And so these are some of the key concepts. And then this circumplex model, if you can flip to the next slide, is really this idea of balancing cohesion and adaptability. Notice that across the top, when we have a family that has very low cohesion, they are largely disengaged. But when they have very high cohesion, they can be really enmeshed. And so what we're really looking for, the best family functioning, is really in this moderate to high cohesion area. Similarly, with adaptability, if families are very low in adaptability, they can be really rigid. Whereas families that are highly adaptable can actually be chaotic. Neither of these is a good thing. And so what we're really looking for is how do we focus on family? How do we develop as a family to be able to be connected and caring about each other, and being able to respond to change in a way that is flexible, but not at the same time chaotic. And so these are some of the things that we really looked at in family functioning. And so about 20 years ago, Raymond Zabriskie and I developed a model of family leisure that really looked at these two concepts of cohesion and adaptability, and mapped them to an idea of leisure behavior that was known as a core and balance model. And it works very well with Olson's model of family functioning, in which core leisure activities really contribute a lot to cohesion and family connection through communication. Whereas balance aspects of family leisure really contribute much more to developing the adaptability component of family function. And so this idea that core and balance leisure activities have direct contributions to aspects of family functioning. And this model has been examined really quite a bit over the last 20 years, using families, all types of families, blended families, families dealing with mental health concerns, families with children with physical disabilities, and has consistently shown pretty well that core activities really do contribute to cohesion, and that certain things really do make sure that people connect and feel close to one another. Balance does contribute to adaptability in some ways, but it also, balance activities like we were just talking about also can be part of family communication and identify things that we all share together, and it connects us through that way as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Gretchen.
Yeah. So what Brian has talked a little bit about these core activities and these balance activities and how they can contribute to those really important family functioning outcomes. But what are they? You might be asking yourself, and that's what we're going to talk about. And so core activities, these are the things that that you do frequently. It may not be on an everyday basis, but they're pretty common activities that might occur in your household. Some examples might include family meals. It might be, one of the things that when I was growing up was pretty common in our house was on Friday night, we would order pizza and we got to eat in the living room and watch a movie. This was a while ago, so we went to Blockbuster or Family Video and we rented our movie. We got our pizza; they were next to each other, and we brought it home and we got to eat that in the living room, which was novel, but it was something that was pretty consistent and something that was integrated into our family. Some of the things that were mentioned in the original chat that we asked was going on a walk to Dairy Queen. It sounds like that was probably close to someone's house, or going on a family walk after dinner. Those are things that are pretty easy to do. They don't require a lot of planning. They don't require a lot of structure. And so if you look at some of those things in the top box, they're typically home-based or in your home or in your immediate neighborhood. They're low cost, and they're high frequency. They're things that you can do all the time. With my own kids, a recent thing that we've been doing now that the weather is nice is once we get home from daycare, they go into the backyard, they play in the sandbox, and then we eat dinner outside. And so it's something that doesn't take a lot of planning, and can be integrated pretty quickly. And it does help with cohesion. We all feel pretty connected and close during those activities. There's a lot of communication that happens during those types of activities. And because of the consistency and the frequency that it occurs, it can contribute to stability, because there's some confidence that these things are happening and similar outcomes occur. And then the next type of activity that Brian mentioned are balanced family leisure. And these are things that you don't do as frequently because they require more planning. They often occur away from the home, and they require more resources. And it sometimes means financial resources, but it doesn't have to. If you think about just the planning resources that are involved, or coordinating with transportation, or if you're going somewhere for the day, you have to think about, okay, what if it's outside, what's the weather going to be? So there's a lot more mental resources involved in the planning and executing of those different activities. And some of those things might include attending a sporting event. I remember somebody mentioned vacations. Those would be balance activities. Going outdoors for a hike or a bike ride, especially if it is not in your immediate neighborhood, but you're going somewhere to go hiking in nature that's not right out your door. Going to a museum, concert, or fair, spending the day at the beach, or a lake, or somewhere else. Like these are the things that they don't happen all the time because they do take a little bit more to coordinate and make happen, but they can contribute to the adaptability because it's not your predictable day. So, on a day off from school, my kids often expect getting up, eating breakfast, going on a walk, coming home and playing, eating lunch, taking a nap. Like those are the things that happen all the time. But sometimes we do other things. We go places. We might drive somewhere where the kids can take their bikes out and ride. And that is, they have to be kind of adaptable from their normal structure. And we also look at the adaptability of sometimes things don't go as planned, and we have to navigate those things as they occur. But they also can help with this family identity. This I like this word, we-ness. These are things that we do together. This is a family event or a family activity that helps make us who we are as a unit. And we to anchor this conversation, our work focuses on supporting individuals who experience mental health conditions and have mental health diagnoses. And we recognize, there are challenges for all people who are parents, but there are some unique challenges that individuals who are diagnosed with mental health conditions face. And a lot of this is rooted in the stigma and discrimination that occurs with having a mental health diagnosis. And there are, some of this can be that there are higher levels of child welfare involvement and custody loss with this population. And sometimes that is because of discrimination from provider organizations, from child welfare organizations. There are factors related to this that are outside of really the scope of what we're talking about. But I think it's important to kind of root the conversation in understanding that there are external challenges because of this discrimination that might occur. Sometimes people internalize that and they may feel like they are inadequate as a parent. And I can tell you, feelings of inadequacy as a parent are common across all parents, regardless of your health status. There can also be concerns from the parents. Is this a diagnosis or a condition that I'm going to transfer or pass on to my child? And we've also, from our own research, we know that there's interest in developing planning opportunities for shared activities with their kids, and that there are challenges because there's high rates of poverty, there's high rates of other external factors, that specific support for planning these activities is something that I think this study was specific to mothers who experience mental health conditions, that parents are looking for support in participating in some of these activities.
Gretchen, I'm thinking that we've got folks who represent our participants from a variety of different perspectives and backgrounds. And I think this is an opportunity to ask, what are some other challenges? What are challenges that either you've personally experienced, that you've seen in the people that you support or are connected with? I mean, what are the particular challenges of being a parent and having a mental health condition?
And we don't have a poll for this, but if you would like to
Yeah.
add it to the chat, that would be excellent.
So Krista identified.
If you don't want to share it publicly, you can also send it to us directly, and we will share what you've shared with us. So there's a comment on sensory processing issues and how that can affect maybe the activities that you choose, or even just feeling overwhelmed at times can certainly be a challenge. Yeah.
And we've got someone who identified some of the things that were identified they dealt with as well. Okay.
Experiencing trauma or having a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress, things that may seem normal to other parents may be challenging or may be triggering. I think that's important to remember, and general feelings of overwhelm and symptoms of anxiety can impact participation.
Challenges of routines. That's an interesting one. I mean, that's definitely one of the things that, that when Gretchen was talking about core family leisure, a lot of times family meals are one of those things that can provide structure and have some sort of routine population, or routine activities. But clearly this is definitely something that's difficult to maintain with a health condition that may, have periods where it's a little more challenging.
Yeah, and I think, having struggles from life before you were a parent, and how that can either just knowing that you had these struggles and not wanting to re-experience them, or not wanting your kids to experience them, or just knowing that they've happened and how they influence your life now, can certainly make parenting challenging. And someone else mentioned, the concern about transferring anxieties onto your loved ones. Sometimes anxiety comes up in the activities that we're doing, and we want to put on a strong face for our kids, and we don't want them to experience the same anxieties. And so recognizing that is a challenge is important.
Yes.
So I think it's great to hear from everyone who's participating and listening, because I think it helps add to the richness of the conversation. And so please, if you have additional thoughts, please feel free to add them either to the chat, or if you have a question along the way, you can throw them into the question and answer. Hannah, I think we'll go on to the next slide. Brian, is this me?
This is us.
Oh, okay.
This was tag team. This was tag team.
All right.
So Gretchen and I do a lot of presenting together, and this is a topic that we've worked on for a number of years together. And so, you know, we really wanted to talk about the role of recreational leisure. And this is really one of the challenges, because it's an area that's widely not thought of as being important as a society. Most Western industrialized societies really do not have a high value of recreation and leisure, and yet it provides a lot of different things that help people, not just parents, but help families. And so obviously it encourages this idea of engagement. It can encourage satisfaction. And it was interesting too, I'm going to go back to the positive emotion that was identified in some of the comments earlier on. There is, you know, it is very clear from research evidence that the studies of positive emotion show that when people express positive emotion, they're more open to developing relationships with others, that the positive emotions we express through smiling, through laughter, through attention, these are all things that make it easier to form relationships, because people feel safe in approaching somebody who has a positive appearance on their face. In other words, they're showing happiness. And so this idea of engagement and satisfaction is really pretty important, because it's through these enjoyable activities. And Gretchen, you could probably talk about the next one.
Yeah, so leisure can be something that provides structure to your life. I have two very young children, and making decisions every day for what we're going to do is challenging. And so I think, you know, having some structure, having some recurring activities, instead of trying to, like, on the fly always figure out what the daily activity is going to be, leisure can provide some things that, especially those core activities, can really provide some consistency and reduce some of the burden related to decision making and making, figuring out the plan for your kids, particularly for young children who aren't at a level where they're able to make some of those decisions at that point. And I also wanted to mention, you know, Brian started this slide with a conversation, or the idea that there's not a lot of focus or value externally placed on family leisure. And I think sometimes, you know, there's a lot of things that have to happen to make sure that everyone is that families are supported. You know, there's work that often has to happen. There's grocery shopping, there's meals, and making sure everyone is fed, and all of these things are equally are important. But sometimes there's the expectation or the thought that leisure just happens. And so time to play and all of these things just sort of happens, and you don't have to really give any thought to it. But I think you know, one of the things that we hope you take away is not that it has to be hard to make these things happen, but I think that it needs to be intentional, to make sure that you're putting as much thought into these family leisure activities as you are into other areas of family participation.
It's a good point, Gretchen. Something we will talk a little bit later, but it's kind of like saving money, right? If you save money that's left over, there's no money left over. And if you plan for, you know, basically leave whatever leftover time you have for leisure, you will find you have no time left over, because every other thing will fill it. Yeah, so I think one of the things too is that this is one of the reasons that I think Gretchen and I both have been very much involved in the role of recreation and leisure, is that it oftentimes is a safe way for people to communicate. For example, I have a grandson who right now is having a real challenging time with new activities, and sounds like school's getting pretty challenging for him. And I don't see him all that often, but when I do see him, his favorite thing is Legos. And so we do Legos together. And by doing Legos together, it provides an opportunity to start a conversation that doesn't have to be about feelings. It can start just about Legos. But we can begin by talking about the thing we're doing together as a way to start to expand that conversation about other things. And so sometimes it's really easier to establish a communication by talking about the thing we're doing together, because it's relatively safe. And so that's really one of the reasons that I think that when we look at family leisure, it provides an opportunity for us to bond around this thing we're doing together.
Yeah, and kind of following that conversation, it provides a place to talk about things that, in the example that Brian gave, talk to your kids about things that they might be struggling with, but it's also an opportunity to use activities to talk about a parent's mental health condition, and that may feel safe because there's positive emotions and there's engagement happening, and so it doesn't feel like such a challenging or scary conversation to the kids. And it can also be reassuring for the parent, because that there are that you're providing a reassuring and welcoming environment during the conversation, so it can help ease some of those more challenging conversations that you need to or want to have with your kids. And it's also an opportunity to see everyone's skills and abilities, which I think is great, because my kids think my job is Zoom meetings, and that's all I do. And my job is more complicated than that. And as they get older, they'll see that, but it doesn't matter to them at this point. But they see, if we go on a bike ride together, they see that we can do these things a little bit differently, but mom has skills to do this. And if we go to the playground, I get to see them be able to climb up and down the slide and those kinds of things. And you get to see the abilities and skills of your family members in a new way. That is, it's when you're having fun and you're doing similar activities, it's often a time that you get to shine and highlight the skills that you have.
Great. And so following up from that, we'd like to get your perspective on what are the strategies that have helped you connect with your family through leisure? What are things that you've done that have in some ways maybe prioritized spending time together, socializing, engaging in activities? Let me give you an example for us as a family. I have, as I mentioned, I have two grandsons, but I have grown children. But during our time of raising our kids, we always ate dinner together. Now, my wife and I have to admit, eat dinner in front of the television now, which is a bad thing. I know everybody says that's a bad thing, but when our daughters were young, we ate dinner together, and this could be as late as 8:30 at night because they were swimmers and had after school things, but it was something we made a priority. So we prioritized family meals, and that was one of the things that really connected us. And particularly weekend meals could be, we could be at the table for an hour and a half, talking, figuring out, just learning about each other. And so that was one of the strategy we used, and that was to prioritize family meals, family dinner. So what are some of the strategies? So
Family meals, family movie nights.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do, when I take my kids to the playground, or even when they're out in the backyard, is I do my best to be present, which means I'm not on my phone for other reasons. If I use my phone, it's to take a picture of what they're doing, or take a video so I can show it to them and we can talk about it later. But making sure that technology isn't trying to interrupt my ability to interact or just observe what they're doing.
Yeah, so someone else, outside in the yard, away from screens. Right. A lot of times that the leader and coach, interesting. That's a very interesting comment there, following my kids' lead. So both sides of that, both being a leader for children, but also allowing children to have some leadership.
Yeah, it's fun on walks. I often let my kids decide which way they want to go, because unless we really need to get back, but ultimately the goal for me is to get them outside and to go on a walk. I don't care if we go up the hill or across the road. So I think, giving them some of that autonomy is fun to see what they do with it, and then gives them some leadership in the family activities. I love the
silly.
acting silly comment too. I think that can, letting your kids see you in a less like, I don't want to say rigid, but structured role, I
Mhm.
think is important. It can make you more approachable to your kids.
So someone identified scheduling time. Yeah, so very much so the idea of scheduling it. This is actually one of the real challenges too. I mean, particularly if we don't value it, it's easy for that scheduled time to get taken up by other things. This was one of the things about the family dinners. That was important to us, and so we weren't going to let other things cause us to not do that. We would find other ways to do those other things. So Hannah, do we anything else new? I don't know if we can scroll down. I don't know where everything. Sometimes they appear on top and sometimes at the bottom. Following my kids' lead. Okay.
I think we can go on. And if you have continuing comments, please feel free to add them to the
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah. So when looking at how to really develop and build resources for family leisure, we really talk about some of the planning ideas, and this is, it's not rigid. Gretchen, I think you came up with a really interesting idea that was a loose scheduling, right? Where you would begin at the week and say, these are the things we want to do, and we don't have to stick them right into a time and schedule them rigidly, but we want to remember what are the things we want to have happen. And so one of the ways is to plan around busy and non-busy days of the week. For some people, maybe there's no such thing. For some people, maybe every day is the same. But it's actually good to take a look at one's sort of weekly schedule and find out where are there spaces that you could make room for some sort of family type leisure activity. Particularly on days that are busier, core activities fit the best in terms of those that are low cost, easy to access, and done in the home. We started playing Uno with my grandsons. Then they're 6 and 7, so they're not that old, but they can figure Uno. But a game of Uno doesn't take very long. The hurt feelings afterwards sometimes takes a little bit of time, but in general, Uno does not take a long time, and we can play it, just in a little bit of time when we've got nothing else to do. And quite frankly, it also is for parents trying to manage kids' screen time. Small board games like that are one of the ways, or card games are one of the ways that we can displace some screen time. And then the balance activities really are going to fit best on non-busy days, and they do typically take some planning and forethought. So figuring out how to get places, having the resources to do it, having the transportation necessary. These are all the kinds of things that you might plan on days that are less busy. It is challenging, I know, in a lot of people's lives, because we seem to work all week, and then we work on our homes and apartments all weekend, if we're not still working on the weekend. So it is somewhat challenging, I know. But in terms of finding activities, I mean, nowadays the ability to find activities available are immense on the internet. Google searches will find incredible amount of opportunities, and even in new places. What are the 10 best things to do in Beaufort, North Carolina, for example? Pick that one, just not necessarily random. I do know Beaufort a little bit, and there are a lot of good things to do there.
When I've found that there's, if you're on social media, if you're on Facebook, there's a lot of times local family groups that you can join, where you can learn about activities that are sort of pop-up activities that are just other families kind of getting together, or they're sharing like, hey, I went to this exhibit or this event the other day. It was great. You should totally take your kids. So I think that there's, learning from your community, even if you don't know a lot of people directly, I think you can join some of those groups to either just get ideas or also possibly meet other people that are similar, have kids in the similar age range, or even in a similar situation as you are.
Yeah. And most municipalities do have parks and recreation departments. and public libraries. And both of these are great resources, and now largely virtual too. So, so a lot of the things that are available are also fairly accessible. I mean, these are going to be, most of these provided by public entities are going to be relatively low cost, if not free. And so
And
this is another opportunity.
yeah, and I've found that our local library has passes that you can check out for a weekend. So you can go to the museum, you can go to the zoo. You just have to, check it out in advance, and then you don't have to worry about the cost of it. It takes some planning and coordination to, make sure that it's available, but it is a resource that reduces the cost for participation.
And then when we're actually down to the level of planning and activity, I mean, one of the things, this is a list that we have, and actually there are a variety of sort of worksheet checklists that can help people to develop a plan in the resources that we have. The Family Leisure Toolkit is one of the things that's linked in the chat that Kathy put up. And so then in that resource, there are a number of checklist types of things to work through. But I mean, some of the things that we want to think about in terms of the activity is, who are our guests? Do we bring extended family? If we do bring extended family, does everybody have the ability to go, on a hike? Or if it's physically strenuous or something along those lines, we want to think about who's involved. Obviously, the location and cost, and then planning when we're going to go. Also thinking about, again, I'm going to go back to my grandsons. I don't know okay, I'm just going to be right open. I don't know what's wrong with them, but they're going to die if they don't have water every 5 minutes. And so you do not take my grandsons anywhere without water. And so keeping that in mind is very important. And then creating some checklists. We can create a checklist just to make sure we haven't forgotten anything. This doesn't have to be something that's rigid but at the same time, if you don't sometimes have a checklist, you forget things. My wife is an amateur photographer. More than a few times we've gone someplace and we get there and she says, "Oh, I forgot my camera." And so that's where a checklist can be helpful, particularly if it's something that takes a while and is more involved. And so really thinking about how to plan for an activity and how to make sure that it goes as well as possible. There are a lot of resources.
I think this can be a way to relieve some of the anxiety that might happen around particularly new activities or new events, creating that checklist, being mindful and feeling confident that you've planned for things that are expected, but also maybe some of the unexpected things can reduce the anxiety and help you be in the moment of when these are more balanced type activities that I think this would be relevant to, but it may help you feel better and feel ready for the activity, which then may make the activity more successful. And so these are a number of resources that we have. I believe Kathy has been dropping them into the chat. But since you have all registered for the presentation, we will send them out to you following. And I think that they're helpful. The Family Leisure the Leisure Education Toolkit for Parents with Mental Illnesses was actually developed by a graduate student that went to Temple, and she worked with me. And parenting is something she had experience working in an inpatient setting, and she is also a parent, and she felt like there was a lack of focus. In an inpatient setting, it was challenging for her because she never saw people as a family. She saw individuals, but she really wanted to make sure that there was something available to parents who could use this. There's some activities in there that will guide you through the planning process, and making sure that there's time for leisure and making it a priority. But there's also some resources in there that focus on using leisure activities to talk with your kids about having a mental health condition, things that you can do to communicate in in a way that is engaging and less stressful if you are either going, you're going into an inpatient stay, or maybe you have the ability to communicate during that stay with your kids. So I think there's some really great resources in there that can talk about how leisure can be a resource for parents to build those connections with their kids. And then the getting out of the house, that is actually every year we do a calendar. And the calendar theme this year is getting out of the house, which is, timely because we've all been stuck in our houses with COVID for so long. And it's this calendar is not necessarily, it's not geared specifically towards parenting and families, but the ideas, there's some revolving topics within there. And this month, for example, is parks, which is great because the weather's finally starting to warm up. And so it might provide some ideas and inspiration for some activities that you might be able to either do more frequently within your own families, or there might be some ideas around balance activities that you could incorporate into your month or your daily life. But the idea being that sometimes, an inspiration to, this month, let's focus on going to new playgrounds around us, might be kind of the idea that having those external ideas sometimes helps you think through, like, okay, what could we do? And then finally, the third one I think was a family leisure toolkit that was focused on activities you could do that were COVID safe. And so, as we think about what we've all gone through in the last 2 years, there were times when balance activities were really hard to do because other than going to parks, which were open, but a lot of things were closed. And so it was difficult to go out and do things. And so there are ideas in here that for balance activities that you could do in your home that still require a little bit more planning, but could be done at your house. So one of the things was, I believe there was a kid restaurant. So working with your kids so that they can plan the meal, they can be the waiters or the waitresses, and they can take orders, that kind of thing, so that it's novel. It kind of mimics going to a restaurant, but it gives them a little bit more control, and it might be a fun thing. Obviously, this is not something that you're going to do all the time because it is planning intensive on, I think, the parents' role, or depending on how old your kids are, they may be able to take a little bit more of the leadership on it, but it's something that provides some novelty in the weekly structure of eating. And then finally, one of the things, if you are interested as someone who may experience a mental health condition, or if you are supporting parents who might experience a mental health condition, we do have an intervention study that we are actively recruiting for. And this is all about family leisure. And so the idea of this study is that parents would have the opportunity to participate in an online program. And that program is designed to support parents to identify both those core activities and make plans for participation in those core activities. And then in the latter half of it, identify balance activities and participate in those balance activities. And so with the idea being that through this intervention project, you would develop some of the skills, you would get support to navigate some of the challenges that you might be experiencing around participation in these activities. And then we would be looking for the effects or the response to it in different areas. Your perceived efficacy as a parent. Do you feel better now that you've done these activities? Is your communication different or better with your kids? And the interview time points that we have, there is a compensation and appreciation for your time for those. One thing I will also mention is that everyone who signs up gets to participate in the intervention. There is this is the design of it is a waitlist control. So there is, you may be assigned to a group that has to wait, but instead of a group being assigned to the active or the program side of it and one group not getting anything. Everyone has the opportunity to participate, which we're excited about.
Great. And Kathy's added in the chat how you can reach us if you're interested. We do want to thank you for your time and joining us today. We really was focused on an overview of understanding families and family leisure at a somewhat broad level. Our next webinar scheduled for the 5th of May will go a little deeper into planning family community participation around, developing and identifying common interests and how do we address barriers and then maximize facilitators for participation as a family. And so please feel free to, if you take a picture, you open up your smartphone and open up the camera, you can click on the QR code. It will take you to the registration for the next webinar on May 5. But
we will also send out information since you participated in this one, we will send you information on the next one as well.
Yep. And I see that Kathy's added in the registration information in the chat as well. At this point, we really would like to open it up for questions and would be happy to address any questions that you have, things that you might have wanted to know, but we haven't covered so far, or something you want to elaborate on.
Yeah, and feel free to add them to the chat or the Q&A is fine. So there's some questions around compensation. That there's no compensation for participating in this webinar. If you are interested in the study, which is what was mentioned in the last slide, there is an incentive, which would be a gift card for participating in that program or that opportunity. Thanks, Ashley. That's always good to hear.
Yes.
And I've added my email to the chat if anyone is interested in this topic and just has general questions that they want to ask. You can always send it to our Temple email, to collaborative email, but you can also email me directly if you would like.
And I've added mine as well, just so that if you wanted to reach out. Actually, I don't know if the links in the chat will be available in the recording. I'm trying to think if they're.
We'll make sure to send them out in sort of when we send out a link to the recording. We'll also send a link to the different resources that were mentioned in the chat today.
I'm glad these, David, I'm glad that they are inspirational, work in peer support, looking ways for peers to interact with their children. I mean, that really is, I'm glad that you feel that way, David. This is really one of the purposes that we have behind providing the webinars, and that is to help people to really think differently about how they engage with families, how they support families. Parenting is a big part of people's lives. And it's a fairly normal part of life for almost all adults. And so it can be something that's challenging for some people, but at the same time, as a parent myself, it is definitely it definitely changed my life.
And if there are no more questions, or if you have questions, but you don't want to ask them now, please feel free to reach out to us directly. We are always happy to hear from folks. Again, thank you so much for everyone who attended today. If you would like, I think it's been mentioned multiple times, but if you would like the certificate of attendance, please email Kathy. Her email is there on the screen. But at this point, I think we'll go ahead and close the webinar, and we hope that we will see you again back on May 5th.